Hello, I'm Karla McLaren, and I want to welcome you to my new project called the Off-Ramp Project. And off-ramp means a lot of things to me, but in this context, what I'm looking for is there a way when we realize we've gone on the wrong road, even though there may be a lot of people on this road and everybody's going forward and the whole thing's moving, when we realize this isn't the way we want to go, is there a way for us to take an off-ramp? And more importantly, is there a way for us to help other people take an off-ramp as well? I came to this title in an unusual way. Do you remember back in 2017 when the first Trump presidency happened? There was a man named Anthony Scaramucci, and he became Trump's communications director, I think in July 2017. And the date is important because it all flamed out. And I think he was there for 10 days before Trump kicked him out. And we've known since then that Donald John Trump has a lot of intense relationships that then he will throw off, right? He's just done it with Elon Musk, no surprise. But this was the first kind of like open thing that we all saw. And I was really interested in watching Anthony Scaramucci, who they called the Mooch, after that, because he was able to take back his own story. He was able to manage that disaster, right, that catastrophic loss of face, and bring his life back to a place that he wanted it to be. I followed him on Twitter at that time because I was like, I need to see this. I need to see this person who had a tremendous loss of face and became a joke. I don't know if you remember, but people were measuring time by how many Scaramuccis it was. Now I'm saying that with an Italian accent. Probably it's Scaramucci here in the United States. But I followed him, and he wrote something really fascinating. He said, you know, this whole Trump cult is very troubling, and liberals need to stop acting like such jerks. He didn't say jerks, but I am. And liberals need to create an off-ramp for these followers of Trump, because the way that we were going about it, which is screaming and shouting and shaming and, being very, very dramatic, meant that a person who had been following Trump, who had been on that road with everybody, and the road is going this way, if they began to have doubts, liberals were making it impossible for them to take an off-ramp, right? They're like, you knew who he was, right? Making everything into a problem, when in fact the problem is going along with the group at that time and at this time. I think we've all been in situations where we went along with a group. Sometimes it was a small group, sometimes it was a political party, sometimes, right, it was our family being jerks. And we didn't know how to get out. And so my interest has been people who can take an off-ramp, people who can create an off-ramp for others. This is important to me because this is my book, Missing the Solstice. And in it, I talk about taking an off-ramp that was really terrifying in my earlier career, from the 1990s till, I think, 2003. I was an author and a leader in the early New Age. Well, it was not the early New Age. It was early for the New Age coming into the national conversation. And I was one of the people who brought the idea of the psychic empath into the national conversation. I soon realized, it didn't take me long. It took me, 5 or 6 years once I became more known, to see the problem with calling an empathic person a psychic, to see the problem within the New Age, to see the problem within alternative medicine, and I ethically couldn't support what I was doing anymore. It was kind of a sense of horror and shame, and there was no off-ramp for me. In fact, the only people who were challenging or even talking about the New Age at that time was the skeptical community. And they were jerks about it. There wasn't this awareness that people like me needed an off-ramp. It was, if I were to go to the skeptical community to read things, it would say, these frauds, these dupes, these ignoramuses who've been defrauded and manipulated, and there's no way that anybody would believe these things because it's completely absurd. But even within that terrible approach, that terrible tone, they were the only people challenging what my entire life had been. And I needed to read them, right? I needed to be there. And I learned how to read around their terrible emotional tone because I needed the information. But as I sat there, I thought, why in the world do I need to read around their rotten tone? Why do I have to do so much unpaid emotional labor to get this information from this community, right? I was angry and horrified at what I was dealing with. I was angry and horrified by them. It was awful. I had no off-ramp. I had no way to get out. Everyone in my life was a believer in the New Age and alternative medicine. Nobody wanted me to leave. No one supported me. And I had to pretty much jump off a cliff to get out. I had to, bite off one of my own limbs to get out of this trap that I was in. And I wrote Missing the Solstice as a blog as I was leaving, so I could remember what it was like. And then I kept writing over the years as I thought about things and as I looked back. So that's why I turned it into a book and wrote some new chapters. And looking back now I think I left in 2003, started really challenging things in 2001. So, it's been 25 years since I started. And looking back now, Missing the Solstice was published on my birthday in 2025. So listening to Anthony Scaramucci talking about that, saying liberals need to create an off-ramp, and I'm looking at our liberal response to what Trump and the entire Republican Party is doing, essentially. And we're not reaching across the chasm. We're not helping people understand how easy it is to get on that road and go in the wrong direction for the wrong reason with the wrong people. It's so easy to get caught on that road. It shouldn't be made harder than it is internally to take that off-ramp. And so I've been studying, what can I, as a liberal, do to make a welcome and open and to say, hey, I used to believe, okay, I know that there's a lot of strange is the wrong word. I know that there's a lot of intense beliefs around who Donald John Trump is. Some people see him as an actual agent of God. There's a lot of beliefs in the QAnon world, which has certainly taken off in the far right or even the medium right, but it's also taken off in the liberal left, right? QAnon is speaking to both sides. I'm like, I don't love QAnon, but how fascinating that it has captured people on both sides of this divide, right? So that people on, the hugely liberal left and the hugely conservative right could come together and talk about QAnon. I'm like, there's something there, right? I'm reading about QAnon now. It's very, very interesting. But Anthony Scaramucci called the Trump world a cult. And I am a cult researcher because a part of missing the solstice, a part of my early life was being in a cult, more than one. And studying them when I was younger, and I had no, sort of support. I wasn't in college. I didn't know anybody who was thinking about cults, but I watched what had happened in those unhealthy groups, and I'm like, I'm never going to do that. And as I became a leader in the New Age, I didn't create a cult. I was so proud of myself. I didn't create a cult of Karla or a cult of empaths or anything like that, right? So I learned the lesson, but it was only when I went to college after I left the New Age and alternative medicine that I was able to begin to articulate what a cult was. And I met a wonderful cult researcher, and we worked together and we wrote together. And I learned, like specifically, this is what a cult is. Here is another social group that isn't a cult, right? Compare and contrast. So it's just interesting that Anthony called out, it's a cult. Liberals need to make an off-ramp. And I've been thinking of it obviously since that day. I don't know if I'm the right person, but I understand the heck out of cults. I understand the heck out of off-ramps. And I had the painful situation of having to leave with no sense at all that leaving would be helpful or worthwhile to me in any way, shape, or form, right? Because there was no one welcoming. There was no one showing me the other possible lives I could live. There was no one saying to me, of course you believe those things, because it was a part of your culture. And the culture was speaking directly to your emotional life and to what was important to you. One thing I want to say about QAnon or believing that Donald Trump is God or is a speaking for God or any of that is no one believes things that are absurd to them. No one believes things that are wildly improbable to them. If you see, cults, you're like, why would anybody be a part of that cult? That's ridiculous. But no one in that cult is a dupe. They've all been drawn there because something spoke to them deeply in their emotional lives, in their empathic lives, in their idealism. Something spoke to them. And sadly, in a cult, this idealism, these emotions, this empathy, this humanity gets twisted by those cultic frames, right? But the people themselves are not broken. They're not ignorant. They're not wild-eyed followers with no mind of their own. We all become involved with things because something is pulling or drawing us to them. And we all have good minds. We all have good hearts. We all have good souls. And sometimes groups or people will take advantage of that. And that's not our fault, right? That's not our fault. Until we learn what controlling groups are, until we learn what cultic forms of leadership look like, we will all be vulnerable to them. And it's so important to be able to say, yeah, I used to believe, this is me, that I was reincarnated for a number of times after I lived in Atlantis, okay, this is for real. And I tell the story of missing the solstice. But I thought that I had an alien who lived on Atlantis and helped us make, one of the best civilizations the world has ever known. And I thought that he had curled himself up in my pelvis that he could use for every reincarnation that I had, for every subsequent reincarnation I had. I'm laughing now, but it was serious, right? But that story was so meaningful to me. That story brought so much meaning to my life. And you look on the outside of it, and I look at it now, I'm like, girl, what in the world were you thinking, right? But I wasn't just thinking, I was feeling, I was being a part of my culture. The belief in Atlantis is big in my area of the New Age. It's still there, the belief in Atlantis. And there are still people whose hearts and minds and souls are being fed by that story in important ways, right? I'm still the bright person. I'm still the sarcastic, hilarious, empathic, weird person I was then, right? It's not like I'm going to look back at Karla, who had that idea when she was 10, when I first heard about Atlantis, right? I'm not going to say, Karla, you dupe, you ignoramus, you nincompoop. I'm going to say, Karla, what was it about that story that so engaged you, that so captured your heart and your soul? Because that's what's important, is your heart and your soul. The story is unimportant, right? We can find better stories, we can find different stories, but it's very hard to do that if people on the outside are saying, you ignoramus, you dupe, you you maroon, you worthless pile of nothing, right? If people on the outside are shouting, what we find in the research is that that shouting, that unkindness, that cruelty, what it will do is increase cohesion within the group, right? It will make the group stronger. If you call them jerks and Nazis and morons and idiots, and if you use those ugly words, and how could you not have known, right? You increase cohesion in the group. And that's bad for us because that group wasn't healthy to begin with, but it's terrible for the individuals. It's terrible to have people pull into something. Maybe they were having questions and they wanted to look out, like I did when I looked at the skeptical community. And I don't even know what it was that kept me going, because, well, I know what it was. It was my ability to work with emotions, right? But if I looked out at the skeptics and it made me go stronger in my New Age identification, that would have been the skeptics injuring me. They would have been victimizing me. They would have been trapping me, right? Because their emotional tone and their approach was so terrible. It was awful. They've gotten better since then, but it was terrible. So if I'm at a party and a friend of mine starts talking about QAnon things, and I'm like, are you out of your, get out of here. I can't even talk to you again. I'll never talk, you dupe. What I'm doing is making sure that there's no off-ramp. What I'm doing is, this is the belief system that's going on the road. And what I've done is I've cut off all off-ramp in regard to me. And I've said, jump off a cliff, right? If I'm not going to jump off a cliff, what they're going to say is, unbelievers are cruel, just like my people told me. Just like we know that liberals are monsters. They're full of hatred. They're always shaming people, right? I will have supported what is being said inside that group. I will have made it true, right? So I'm a part of the problem. And learning that you're a part of the problem is, there's going to be shame there, right? But shame is a beautiful emotion without which we cannot develop empathy, right? Shame tells us you have transgressed against someone. You have done something wrong. And I'm talking about the shame that is true. That I've done something wrong. I've attacked someone at a party and I've sent them away and I've dehumanized them and I've isolated them. Yeah, because I can't handle it. And so if it's even possible, I can say, look, I overreacted and I'm sorry and I want to listen to you and I love you and I'm afraid. Please, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm going to change my behavior and I'm going to act in a better way next time. Right? Now, there's a different kind of shame where someone is shaming you in terms of, who you are. Like you're a white person, and that means you're trash, and you used to be in the New Age, which means you're trash, and that sort of thing, where people try to place their own ugly values onto you. That's different. That's abuse. That's not. I think when people look at shame, they make a really important mistake, which is to think that other people's attempt to abuse you is shame. I mean, they are trying to shame you, they are shaming you, but that's not shame, that's their abuse. My shame that comes from inside me says, oh, you did something wrong, you need to make amends. You need to clean this up, right? I can't clean up abuse. I can't stop being a white person, right? I can't get this off of me. So that's ridiculous. They're in the wrong, right? But that's not what shame is. Shame is an intrinsic emotion that comes out of you when it's time for you to make amends and clean up your act, as we all need to do, probably daily. We all make mistakes. We all speak out of turn. We all act like jerks, right? And shame is the emotion says, we need to fix that, right? If you don't have shame, this intrinsic shame, and what it means is that you don't care about other people. And if you say something snappy and crappy, you're just a sarcastic jerk, you don't care. And you never fix it. And you never take responsibility for your own behavior. To not have that intrinsic sense of shame means you're not empathic because you don't care about people. So a lot of the reason that I could leave the New Age and go to nothing and no one and get no off-ramp and no help and still do it is because I understood shame. And the intrinsic shame of there's something wrong here in this empathic worldview, in this community, in the New Age, in alternative medicine. There's something wrong here, and I don't want to stand for this anymore. I don't want to be a face for this anymore. It was my shame that kept me going, and I looked at, the lack of off-ramps, and I kept going because of my shame. It is an incredibly healing emotion if you know what you're doing. But if you don't, you'll just run from it for your whole life, right? And you'll become less and less empathic and less valuable to yourself because you'll know that you're behaving in a way that's not okay. You'll know that. And it might wake you up at night. It might make you reach toward things that make you forget, right? Distractions and addictions and displacements, right? But if you can turn toward your shame and say, what did I do wrong? What am I feeling wrong about? And your shame can say, well, there's this, there's this, there's this, there's this, there's this. And you can write them down on a piece of paper and write down, okay, so how do I make amends? All right, so what do I do about it? Instead of just being sort of overtaken. Okay, so that's how I took an off-ramp. And what I'm hoping in this project is to make it so that whatever off-ramp you need to take, whatever way that your soul is saying, I don't want to be on this road with all these people going this way. I want to see if there's a different way. I'm tired and I'm feeling I don't feel right about this. What I'm hoping is that we can create an off-ramp together. I have books and researchers and lots of years of looking into this. How did I take an off-ramp was a question I had for myself when there was no way and no one there to welcome me. How did I do it? And it wasn't sort of, I'm so special. What I was trying to find was, where are people like me, right? I was so lonely. Where are people who could do this? How do I find them? How do I find people who could do what I did? And what can I learn from them, right? So that it's easier for other people. Missing the solstice is one of my off-ramps. If you're questioning the New Age and alternative medicine, if you're questioning group identification, if you're questioning what people are telling you. Missing the solstice is like, here's one person who did it, right? It's a storytelling way to help people see there's always an off-ramp. There's always an alternative. There's 96 answers to any question, right? There's not just one. And so that's what this is me, a person who took an off-ramp with no support, providing an off-ramp as a liberal Democrat, not wanting to get into the place of throwing shame at you, which is essentially abuse, right? Telling you you're bad, telling you you're wrong, telling you you're evil, telling you you're a Nazi. What that's going to do is injure you, and I'm not available for that. But it's also going to make you feel that the people who are telling you that liberals are evil and they're child molesters and they eat babies. I mean, that's some of the things that people are being told, right? Which is a horrific abuse of their souls, which is a horrific abuse of their good minds and their good hearts. When groups tell you that outsiders are evil, there's something wrong with the group. It should be like your first light bulb. When groups tell you that someone else is evil, that is cultic high control happening, in real time. So as a liberal, when I'm told that anybody who follows Trump is evil, I'm going to be like, there's something wrong in the liberal world. There's something wrong here. This is getting cultic, and what it's going to do is create a chasm that no one can cross. And I'm not interested in building more chasms, right? I already went across a chasm, and that's enough, okay? That's enough. I did my work. I'm not interested in being a liberal Democrat who treats Trump supporters or anyone who doesn't agree with me as a devil, as a Nazi, as a person whose wishes and dreams and beliefs are toxic, and I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in reaching across chasms in a way that was never offered to me when I was trapped, and to find ways that we can make that more possible. Because as a cult researcher, I can tell you without any doubt that a lot of things that are happening around the Republican Party, around Trump, are cultic in nature. I'm not saying it is a cult, because I understand cults well enough to know that cults have to have these four processes around them to be cults, right? To be enclosed groups that people literally can't get out of. But there are many, many cultic aspects in the whole kind of conservative movement in the United States today. And if you're interested in learning about that and seeing how to protect yourself from cultic aspects, no matter where they are, then we're going to do that. We're going to talk about that openly, but not in a way where I would say, because people are dupes. Rather, I'm a cult survivor, and I didn't lose my good heart or my good mind when I was in the middle of the cult. Instead, it was being sort of used to fuel the cult, to make the cult stronger. I was being used as a tool within that movement. And leaving meant that I wasn't a tool of anything anymore. I was myself. And so when we talk about cults, it's not going to be pointing our fingers at those weirdos. It's going to be understanding what brought people in and what was important to them and what called to their soul and what called to their heart and what called to their idealism, so that if they're ready to come out, right, we can say, welcome. Let's talk about this. Did you believe that you had an Atlantean pelvis alien? Because I did, right? To make it a part of being human, to be drawn into strange ideas, or to be drawn into very high dedication groups where everybody kind of loses their sense of humor, and we all become focused on the this is my quest, right? And then shake it off. Shake it off. There was a movie called The Philadelphia Story, and Katharine Hepburn, I think she was Tracy Lord was the name of her character. She said something that I remembered forever, which is, the time to make up your mind about people is never. Because if I could leave a whole career, if I could leave everyone I ever knew, everyone in my family, if I could leave all of that behind and take an off-ramp, anybody could. The time to make up your mind about people is never. And so I welcome you to the Off-Ramp Project. I welcome you to a loving, empathic, sarcastic, humorous, chasm-busting, off-ramp creating world where we can take a look at what happened to us as Americans, as this great American experiment seems to be sort of going down in flames, and we're at each other's throats and thinking the other is evil. That is not okay. That is not okay, y'alls. And maybe come out of it not just to get over this problem, but with tools in the future to say, like I did as I became a leader in the New Age, I'm not going to do anything that the cults did, right? I'm not going to do that to people. I'm not going to trap people. I'm not going to force them to believe things, and I'm not going to make outsiders look like devils. I'm not doing it. No, I won't. So that we come forward from this moment with more humor, with more empathy, with more knowledge, with more lived experience of what that was, to believe that I had to believe that I had an Atlantean pelvis alien, okay? It was real to me at the time. It meant something to me at the time, right? I laugh now, but I'm hoping it's a kind laugh. I was like, baby Karla, I'm glad you survived. I'm glad that helped you survive. But yikes, okay? Yikes. What I'm hoping is we can look back in love at this desperate time and see ourselves learning and growing through it, see ourselves becoming who we had always meant to be by going through kind of the gauntlet of the troubles that we can create for each other when we don't know better yet. So welcome to the Off-Ramp Project. Thank you, Anthony Scaramucci, for your strange journey and for giving me the idea of creating off-ramps when things are as deeply troubled as they are. Welcome.